right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's financial aid information session. My name is Brittany Boss, and I'm the Master's Admissions and Financial Aid Associate here at BU's Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. I know that in previous virtual sessions, we've already talked about financial aid, but I want to go a little bit deeper today just to give you some more details and to outline the process for all of you, just so that you're prepared for the fall semester. So before we begin, I do just want to say thank you for being here and for joining us. Hopefully you find it super informative. We're super happy to be connecting with you and preparing for your studies here at BU. And then I also want to note that I'm sure many of you have questions, so feel free to submit those in the chat box, and then we will address those as we go throughout the presentation. I'm also joined by a few colleagues of mine who will also be answering some questions in the chat box to help out as well. So you might hear from them as well as from me. And then I'll also leave some time at the end of the presentation for any questions that you have as well. And then I also want to note that my window is open right now. So if it is too loud and you're unable to hear me, just let me know and I will shut it. Great. So we'll just get started. This first slide talks about different types of graduate financial aid that is available. The main source being two different federal loans. The first is the Federal Direct Unsubsidized Stafford Loan, which is now called the Federal Direct Unsubsidized Loan. We recommend this loan to students first, as it does have a lower interest rate than many of the other loan options. This one has an annual maximum of $20,500, which includes the fall, the spring, and the summer session if you plan on taking summer courses as well. As I mentioned, it does have a lower interest rate than the PLUS loan, which is why we recommend this loan first. But then the PLUS loan is the second loan that we recommend, and that is a credit-based loan, which means that students do go through a credit check. And then once they're approved, then they can borrow up to the remainder of their cost of attendance with the PLUS loan. So the PLUS loan kind of bridges the gap between the cost of attendance and the Federal Direct Unsubsidized Loan. And it does have a little bit of a higher interest rate, as is listed on this slide. Typically, the students will use a combination of both of these loans to fund their education for the academic year. Repayment of these loans might be familiar to you from undergrad. It doesn't begin until 6 months after you drop below 6 credits. So it's typically 6 months after you graduate is when you'll start repaying your loans. And the standard repayment plan is about 10 years to repay your student loans. And then we'll also be speaking to the last bullet points on this slide later on in the presentation. In terms of how much you can borrow, there are two main numbers for this. There's the cost of attendance and total aid. So the total aid consists of any merit scholarships, external scholarships, private loans, and service-free stipends, and that makes up one number. And then the other number is the cost of attendance, which includes tuition and fees, room and board, health insurance, and a handful of other expenses that will be outlined in the next slide. So we essentially take your cost of attendance and subtract your total aid from that amount to find the amount that you're eligible to borrow in loans. So as an easy example, say your cost of attendance is $80,000 and you are receiving a $20,000 scholarship, then you'd be eligible to borrow $60,000 in total for your loans. I just got a question in the chat box asking, are international students eligible for the federal loans? Nope. So these federal loans are only available to domestic students. We'll talk a little bit more about federal loans later on or loans for international students later on in the presentation. But the loans I'm talking about for the federal loans are only for domestic students. It's a good question. So this slide outlines the cost of attendance for the 2021-2022 academic year. which is for the 9 months of the programs. So the top 3 numbers are all billable expenses, and those will appear on your student account. So that includes tuition, fee for student services, and a fee for health and wellness, which are 2 resources that are on campus that you'll have access to for the academic year, as well as medical insurance. And the medical insurance is something that can be waived if you're already covered under a different plan, such as a parent plan or a spouse's plan. So you can do that on the student link. And then once you waive your health insurance, then that number would not be factored into your cost of attendance, and it won't appear on your student account bill. The numbers listed under living expenses are not actually billed to your student account, so you won't see them show up on your student account bill, but we do take them into consideration as expenses that you will have outside of academic expenses. So that includes room and board, any transportation costs, and books and supplies. So I do want to note too that these are average costs, and many students don't spend this amount of money depending on their lifestyle choices. So these are just built in to give students space to borrow loans, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be spending this entire amount throughout the academic year. And then the bottom number shows the total cost of attendance, which is the number that we use to determine the amount that can be borrowed in loan funding. So that amount for this year, if you are full-time and you are also borrowing for medical insurance health plan, then you'll be eligible to borrow up to $82,676 in the federal loans. In terms of determining eligibility, there are a number of criteria to consider. You have to be a US citizen or a permanent resident or an eligible non-citizen. You also have to be enrolled in a degree program at least half time. So that means you have to be enrolled in at least 6 credits per semester. And the credits must count towards your degree. They can't just be a bunch of random courses. They have to count towards your degree to be eligible to borrow loans. You must be registered with the Selective Service. You can't owe a refund on a federal grant or be in default on any other previous educational loans. You must be making satisfactory academic progress towards your degree, and you can't exceed the maximum borrowing limit for the federal direct loan. And then the final one is you must meet the criteria for the credit check for the Federal Plus loan. So there's a handful of different things listed there. If you do have questions about that, let us know. I think there are a few questions in the chat box right now that I'll address later on. But these are the determining eligibility for borrowing the federal loans. So in terms of the federal loan maximums, you can borrow up to $20,500 per year with the federal direct unsubsidized loan, and that includes fall, spring, and summer. The aggregate loan limit for graduate students is $138,500, and that includes both graduate and undergraduate borrowing. So if you're curious about your previous loan borrowing record and you're wondering if you're close to that aggregate borrowing limit, you can access your record online at nslds.ed.gov just to check how much you've borrowed in the past to see if you're close to that maximum limit. For the Federal Plus loan, we just look at your cost of attendance and total aid. So there's not necessarily a borrowing limit for the Plus loan other than up to your cost of attendance. So students do typically use this loan to cover the gap of what is not covered by the federal direct unsubsidized loan. And then I do also want to note that whatever loans that you request, they are dispersed into 2 equal installments at the beginning of each semester. So as an easy example, if you requested a total of $20,000, then it will disperse $10,000 in the fall and $10,000 in the spring. It does not disperse the whole $20,000 at the start of the academic year. And that applies for both the federal direct loan and the Federal Plus loan. And then with that as well, I do want to note that the disbursement will be a little bit less than what you requested, just because there is a loan origination fee that the government will take out. Let me go back to a previous slide to see the rates of that. So the federal direct Stafford loan, there's a 1.057% origination fee, and the plus loan has a 4.228% origination fee. So those will be taken out of your disbursement. And that's just what the federal government will take out as their little pocket change, I guess. I'm not sure why exactly that happens, but that can always be a surprise when it's not the exact amount that you requested. And that loan origination fee is why. And then if you do have a valid credit balance on your student account after the loans disperse, then you may request a refund for that amount to use the money for housing and living expenses that were outlined on the previous slide. And you can do that on the student link on or after the first day of classes. So the first day of classes is the first day that you can request the refund. And the funds will be directly deposited into your US bank account from there. And then as a side note to that, you will need to set up direct deposit on your student link so that the funds are directly deposited into your student account rather than receiving a paper check for it. Okay, so now we'll go through the steps that students take to apply for loans. So there are essentially 3 steps that might seem overwhelming at first, but they're really pretty easy. So the first step is to file the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. You would have to submit a new FAFSA each year that you apply for loans. So if you apply for loans this academic year and consider your schooling through the next academic year, then you will have to submit a new FAFSA next year as well. If you go to fafsa.edu.gov, you can begin this process by using our BU school code of 002130. And then a helpful note as well is that the IRS data retrieval tool, if you haven't submitted your FAFSA yet, is a really helpful tool for students because it shortens the process and it imports a lot of information that you may not know off the top of your head. So it will import it from different documents that you have submitted in the past. So that's a really helpful tool. And then if you have any questions about this process of the FAFSA, I know that the FAFSA website themselves is a really great resource and so happy to help with any questions or troubles that you have. But you can also contact us at the email listed on this slide as well. So then after submitting the FAFSA, the next step is to submit loan request forms. So similarly to the FAFSA, this must be done each year that you want to apply for loans. And we have 2 separate forms. There's one for the federal direct unsubsidized loan, and there's one for the federal plus loan. And the plus loan is the one that's pictured here on this slide. The federal direct unsubsidized loan is available to complete as an online form, but the plus form is still in PDF version. So we will send those in the chat box just so that you have access to those right now if you haven't viewed those already. But then those can be sent to us. The online form will be sent to us automatically, and then the plus form, you can email it to us at grsaid@bu.edu. And then the third step is to complete the master promissory note and entrance counseling. So you probably had to do these if you previously borrowed loans in undergrad, but as a new graduate student, you will have to complete them again. They can be done on the Federal Student Aid website at the link listed on this slide. And be sure to select the graduate/professional students tab, as a lot of people will just recomplete the undergraduate tab instead, but we do need the graduate professional form. And then you'll also need to complete both the master promissory note and the entrance counseling for both loans. So for The entrance counseling, you actually just have to complete it once, and that applies to both loans. But the master promissory note, you will have to complete one for each loan that you are planning on borrowing. So if you're planning on borrowing both loans, you will have to complete 2 master promissory notes. And then to wrap up, once you complete all of these steps, our financial aid team will begin processing your loan requests, and the funds will be applied to your account around the billing period, which will be after you enroll and register for classes. So again, you can't request a refund for the credit on your account until the first day of classes, but you will be able to see your account on your student link once you register for classes. Right, in terms of private loans, BU has done some cross-referencing with different private lenders to look at competitive prices. You aren't required to borrow from one of these lenders, but the prices may be competitive to other options. We also recommend that you compare different credit-based loans, as you can only choose one credit-based loan per year. So we encourage you to find one that's the best fit for you. So if you borrow the plus loan, then you won't be able to borrow another credit-based loan if that's what you're hoping to do. We also have a number of resources at the bottom of this slide that are really helpful in calculating repayment plans over the course of 10 to 15 years. And then I know that can seem a little bit daunting, but keep in mind that once you graduate with your master's degree, you will be making more money than with your undergraduate degree. So you can definitely factor that into your repayment plan when you're checking out these different calculators. And then along with this slide, I do want to mention a few loans that are available to international students. And I will send a link to that in the chat box after this presentation. But our international students will tend to look into different private loans like Empower Financing, which is the largest loan provider for our international students, as well as Prodigy Finance. They also offer some loans for different programs. There are also a handful of other private loans that will lend to international students if they have a US co-signer that's willing to sign with them. So that's another option. And then another option is to look into loans from your home country. We know that's not always an option, but it's definitely something to consider and something to look into. But I will send a link to those international student loans after this presentation. We also want to list a couple of outside scholarships that students have found helpful in the past. A lot of these, the deadline has probably passed already for fall 2021, but you may still definitely consider looking into them and applying to them if applicable. So these links are to scholarship search websites that may offer scholarships depending on where you live geographically, what program you're studying, depending on your ethnic background. There's a lot of different scholarship opportunities that depend on a few different factors, but it does require you to do some digging and researching into these websites. So definitely feel free to take a look at all of these resources that we have listed here to see if there are any scholarships that are available to you that you might apply for outside of BU. So I also want to list the important dates to keep in mind. So September 2 is the first day of classes, and that's the first possible day that you can request a refund for the credit on your account. And then September 16 is the payment deadline for all of our incoming students. So we definitely recommend, if you're planning on borrowing loans, we recommend getting your loan request forms to us a couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks before the payment deadline, just to make sure that we can process them in time and that they appear on your student account before the payment deadline, so then you don't have any late fees. So that's just an important timeline to keep in mind. There's not technically a deadline to submit loan request forms, you can always submit them throughout the semester if you don't borrow the full amount at first and realize later that you need some more for housing. But for your student bill, we do recommend submitting those forms at least 2 to 3 weeks before September 16. We also have a number of other helpful resources that I know many of you may be looking into already. Housing is a big one, and it will factor into your cost of attendance. So we have listed here a link to off-campus services, which allows you to link up with other students that are looking for housing. And I find that they have reasonable prices as well. So that's a great link to look at. From our experience, we know that Boston is a really great city, but real estate isn't super cheap here. I know that it has decreased a little bit this past year. But yeah, that being said, keep in mind that there are housing options that really range in price. And so we encourage you to find something that fits within your budget. Personally, I live in a nice spacious house in Somerville with 3 other roommates. For a fraction of the price of a luxury studio apartment downtown. So there is a big variety, and there's a lot of options depending on the budget that you're looking at. So that's just something to be aware of and know that there are different options to fit your needs. And all of the staff on this call here live near Boston, but in different neighborhoods. So if you have any questions about the best neighborhoods to live in, or safety or accessibility, don't hesitate to reach out and ask us, and we can all offer some different opinions and facts about that. We also have different sources of entertainment. The BU Arts Initiative helps students to find venues around the city that are affordable or free. And these students also get free admission to the Museum of Fine Arts. The BU FitRec is a gym facility on campus, and students who enroll full-time have membership to the FitRec automatically as part of the tuition and fees. So membership is already included in your bill. So you'll have access to the BU FitRec. And then we also have a link to a budget worksheet here that can help you look at the bigger picture financially for the time spent here for your schooling. And then the last resource here is our graduate education resources website, which is for all of Boston University. There's a lot of really helpful resources, not only for enrollment and housing, but for all fields across BU. So it might be a good website just to poke around at and get familiar with, just so that you know the resources that we have to offer before coming to campus. And so that concludes our presentation. I see that there's a bunch of questions in the chat box that I'll begin to go through. And then I also want to list here on our slide our contact information. And I also lastly want to mention that we know that finances can be a bit of a personal matter. So if you'd prefer to set up a one-on-one appointment with us, we'll send you a link in the chat box to do that. Just so that we can have a personal discussion and get that all settled. So now I'm going to start looking through these questions. I know I also mentioned that I would send a link to the international student loans. So let me find that and send that here quick. Okay. There's a question asking if we can opt into medical insurance coverage midway through a semester. That is a good question. I believe that there's a pretty hard deadline for opting in and opting out. Let me see. Let me try to find their website to see if they have any more information about that. I think usually it's right around the payment deadline. That is the deadline to opt in or out. But let me check. I know that this past year it was September 20. Okay, yeah. Yep, it says the fall waiver must be submitted by September 20. And then if you're entering a spring semester, the waiver must be completed by January 31. So I'm just gonna send this link in the chat box. You may want to contact the Student Health Services office as well to make sure, because they're the ones who really deal with it. But based on this, it looks like the deadline is September 20. Okay. Yep, Candace answered about the next info session, which is on the 21st. And she's to sign up to that as well. Okay, there is a question asking about using both federal loans to cover the cost of attendance before looking into other student loan providers and private loans. That's a really good question. So we always recommend using the federal loans to cover your cost of attendance, just because we find that the interest rates are a lot lower than private loans. We're also not able to recommend any private loans specifically to you. So that's definitely something that you might want to look into to see their repayment plans. I know if you plan on repaying your student loans really quickly right outside of school after you graduate, then some private loan options may be better. They might have a lower interest rate depending on how fast the repayment plan is. But we always recommend that the federal loans have the lowest interest rate and that those are the best options. There's a question asking, when will the student account, oh, sorry, Liz or Catherine, I see that you have already responded to a lot of these. I'll try to skip those. Okay, there's a question asking, is the $138,500 maximum only for the Stafford loan, or does the PLUS loan also contribute to that limit? So that is the limit for all of your loans, all of your federal loans. So that includes undergraduate borrowing and graduate borrowing, both the Stafford loan and the PLUS loan. So you won't be able to borrow past that maximum limit that the government sets. So if you're not sure about that limit and how close you are, then you can look it up on your end on the NSLDS website. But that's something that we'll also check as we process your loans, just to make sure that you're not passing that limit. There's a good question asking, how does the work study program factor into financial aid, and when do we know if we've been accepted into a work study program? So have you already submitted an application to the federal work study? I know that the deadline has passed. If you've already sent in your application, then we've probably received it and it's being reviewed right now. But for work study, you're receiving compensation for your work that you're doing. So that does not factor into your cost of attendance, and it does not subtract from your loan borrowing as you are actually working for that money. So it's only non-service stipends, such as like PhD students, they receive non-service stipends where they don't have to actually be working for the money that they're being given. So that subtracts from their borrowing amount. But if you're working for your money, then that will not subtract. There is a question asking if the slides are available online. You found bits and pieces of this info scattered around the website, but it'd be useful to have it all in one place. We do have our previous session online on our financial aid website. Candace or Shamim or Catherine, I don't know if you want to send a link to that, but that might be helpful just so that you have this on hand. Typically, we also send out the slides as well as the video recording after the session. So within a few days, hopefully we'll be able to send that out to all of you so that you can have it on hand. Yeah, there's a question asking if grad school government loans, when you do the FAFSA, different from undergrad because your parent is on your undergrad. Is it just a student for grad school loans? That is correct. So as a graduate student, you are considered independent. And so we no longer need any parent information that will not be taken into consideration. So you only have to fill out your portion of the FAFSA information. You won't have to submit any parent information. There is a question. Okay, I see Catherine answered that actually. There is a question asking if you should already have access to your student link account. That is a good question, and we can look into that for you. Once you accept the offer, then it typically takes a few weeks or so to get you access. If you're a domestic student, it will typically happen within the next week. If you're an international student, then we first need all of your international documents to send to the ISSO before we give you access to your student account. So if you want to email us, then we can look into your situation to see why you don't have it yet. There's a question asking if there's any merit-based scholarships for the psychology program. The psychology master's program does not offer any scholarship or assistantship aid. So most of the students in the psychology program, and really all of the programs in general, will maybe look into some outside private scholarship options. They'll also look into working part-time jobs on campus or in the city to help fund their living expenses. And then loans are also one of the main options that all of our students will consider. Okay, yep, there's a question about a payment plan, and I see that Catherine sent a link to that. So that might be something that you're interested in. If you don't want to pay your tuition in all one chunk, then our student accounting office might be able to help you set up a plan where you pay in a few payments throughout the semester. Yep, there's a few questions asking for access to the slides. We will be sharing the session with you via email within a week after the end of this session. We will be sharing it with everyone. There's a question asking how you waive the health insurance plan. So for that, you have to do that through your student link. I know I sent a link earlier. I'll just send it again, but this website has instructions on how to waive that. You basically have to go to your student link, select the Money Matters tab, and then the Student Health Insurance Plan tab. And then that will guide you through the process of submitting the correct documents to waive the student health plan. Okay, there's a question asking After we complete all the steps to apply for the Stafford unsubsidized and the Graduate Plus loans, when should we expect to receive approval confirmation? That is a good question. We will begin processing these loans within the next week or so. It can take up to 5 to 10 business days for our office to process them. So if we need any additional information from you to process them, then we'll reach out. And then after we process them, we'll also email you to let you know that they have been processed and that they will appear on your account shortly. So if you've already submitted loan forms, then hopefully within 5 to 10 business days, you will receive confirmation. And that's the typical standard response time for the federal loans. So there's a question asking, so we can borrow loans enough to cover tuition plus extra to cover off-campus rent, correct? Yeah, yep, that is correct. I'll send you a link to our cost of attendance website as well. You are allotted about $20,224 to borrow for living expenses. So you can borrow for all of your tuition and fees, plus the $20,224 on top of that for living expenses. And that's the maximum amount. Yes, yep, grsaid@bu.edu is the email that you'll send your forms to. What would tuition look like if we decided to go part-time? So the link that I just sent will be helpful for that as well. It does list the part-time credits. So tuition per credit is $1,830 per credit. And that's for less than 12 credits per semester. So hopefully you can calculate it based on those numbers. There's a question asking, can international students get a loan? Yep, I did send a link to loans for international students in the chat box, and I can send it here again. But there are a handful of different loan options for international students to look into. Unfortunately, the federal loans are not available, but there are a few US lenders that offer credit-based loans that you can apply to with a US co-signer. Otherwise, loans like Empower Financing and Prodigy Finance, which are both listed on this website, as well as loans from your home country, if that's an option as well. Okay, there is a question asking about if there's a database for finding research and teaching assistantships. Are these positions usually worked out independently with your advisor? Lastly, are they paid positions? Yeah, so each department has a little bit of a different process for this, but they are the ones who will help set you up with a position if they have some available opportunities. That's something that's typically given after the first semester, once the faculty members know what kind of help they need. So I would recommend reaching out to your department directly to see if there's any assistantship positions available. But how that works for payment is that teaching assistants and research assistants are paid $6,000 per semester as a stipend. So they'll be paid weekly, up to $6,000 per semester. There's another question asking if I can go over the various TA and RA position availabilities. For that, I would recommend reaching out to your department directly to see what the options are, as it really depends on the year and what kind of help the department needs. So I would recommend reaching out to them to see what positions they have available. And then I also want to note that usually they won't give positions until the second semester or after the first semester has already begun. Once you're able to start forming relationships with faculty and staff members in the department, and once they kind of know if they need any teaching help that year or if they need any research help that year. There's a question asking if you can resubmit your federal direct unsubsidized loan request if information under the anticipated funds section has changed. Yeah, yep, you can definitely resubmit that form. You would just have to go back online to the website and just redo it. I would say unless it changed dramatically, like if you have outside scholarships, then you won't really need to resubmit a new one. But if you receive some additional outside funding other than the PLUS loan, then you'll just want to go back to that original website and fill out a new form, and we'll just override it with your old form. There's a question asking if you can only apply for loans at the beginning of the year, or can you apply before the spring semester? Yeah, yep, that is a good question. You can definitely apply for just the spring semester. If you find that you don't need any loans right now for the fall semester, then you will have the option to borrow just for the spring. And the applications for that, you probably won't want to submit it until maybe like your Christmas break or something, just so that we have time to process that before the spring payment deadline. All right, I see that Shamim has sent a lot of information about on-campus job opportunities. So that's definitely a helpful link that you guys should check out for on-campus jobs. You won't be able to apply to those until after you are enrolled and registered. But otherwise, they always have a lot of great job opportunities on that board to look at. There's a question asking if master's students who choose to work part-time also do their master's degree part-time. Yeah, that's a good question. Most of our students will still finish their program full-time, but they'll work part-time on top of that. And I know that looks a little bit different for, for each student, depends on how they can balance all of that together. Shamim, I don't know if you want to quick hop on and kind of talk about that, as you are a full-time student and also working in our office as a grad assistant as well. You might have some helpful information about balancing all of that.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I think you summarized it really well, Brittany. I think it's up to every student's individual preference. Like I work part-time about 20 hours a week, and then I have a full-time course load. So I take 4 classes, and it's been pretty manageable. You do have to manage your time really well and obviously prioritize your academics, but a lot of students work part-time in my program. So I think it's definitely doable.
Great, thank you. Okay, there's another question asking if you're eligible for a Stafford student loan, even if you're a part-time student. So as long as you're registered for 6 credits, then you will be eligible to borrow loans. If you are registered for below 6 credits, then you will not be eligible. But as long as you are registered for 6 credits or more, even if you're part-time, then you can borrow loans. There's a question asking who to email about getting access to the student link. If Candace, I don't know if you want her to email you or if she should email me.
You can email the GRSMAMS inbox. I will paste that right in the chat box.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, if you have any questions about access to your student email or the student link, feel free to email the address that Candace is going to send in the chat box, which is grsmams@bu.edu, and we can look into that for you. There is a question asking if we can give a little bit of information on which banks international students usually open their accounts in upon arrival to Boston, as in any specific requirements from BU. That's a really good question. Candace, I don't know if you want to talk about that one as well. I know that BU doesn't have any requirements for that, so it will be up to you, but Candace was kind of in your same situation. So I'll let her talk about her experience with that.
So sorry, I didn't catch the question. What's the question again?
Oh yeah, it's if okay, it says, can you give a little bit of information on which banks international students usually
I
open
see,
their
I
accounts
see.
in?
Okay, yes. So I had an account at Bank of America. I think just because it's everywhere in Boston. So it's very easy. They have many locations throughout across town. So what I did, I just walked into one branch, and then they didn't require me because I didn't have a social security number yet. But I think you just need the valid address, permanent address in the US, and then some other personal information. And it's pretty easy to set up. I set up my account within like an hour at the bank. So you don't even need the appointment or something like that. So it's pretty straightforward.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
Okay, there is another question asking, is it possible that students work on campus jobs and are able to pay school fees? That is a good question. So how that works is that it is a little bit separate from each other. So you will have to pay your school fees before arriving on campus for the fall semester. I guess the payment deadline is September 16th. So you'll have a few weeks after arriving before the payment is due. Typically, students will work jobs on campus to help pay for their living expenses like rent and food and transportation. So it is possible to fund your living expenses with working on campus part-time. But your job will also help, if you plan on saving that money to help pay for your tuition and fees for the next semester, that's definitely possible as well. But usually our students will use some of their savings or a scholarship or loans to pay for their tuition and fees. Okay, we have about 10 more minutes, so I'll definitely leave it open for some more questions. We just received another one. If I didn't complete my application process in this year, what will be my status? That is a good question. So you submitted an application for this year, or you did not yet submit your application? If you did not complete your application for fall 2021 for admission, then you'll want to probably apply for fall 2022, and that deadline, okay, for fall 2021. Yeah, so if you were not able to submit your application and apply for fall 2021, then the applications do open up on September 1st for fall 2022. So we really encourage you to start an application and submit an application for fall 2022 if you were not able to submit in time for fall 21. Does that answer your question? Okay, and Candace just sent a great link about opening up a bank account for international students. It's on the ISSO website. And if you are an international student kind of wondering about all of that, I know that the ISSO website does have just a lot of great information, both about bank accounts and just the transition to BU in general. So you might want to check out their website anyway. Okay. So that you may start the official application. Do you mind retyping that question? I don't quite understand the first part of it. I think you're asking when the applications will open up for fall 2022. The first day that the applications will be available is September 1st. So that's the first day that you'll be able to start your application for fall 2022. There's a question asking if we were given student emails after accepting your admission, or do we have to set it up on our student account? That is a good question. So yes, students are given an email after they accept the offer. It's not automatic, as we do have to set it up on our end first before we can let you set it up on your end. So it's not automatic, right, when you accept your offer of admission, but you should have it within a week or two after accepting your offer, or after sending us the documents for the ISSO to create your I-20. So if you kind of have questions about where that is in the process, if you haven't received your student account yet, then I would recommend that you reach out to us at the email that I just listed in the chat box, and we can check up on it for you. Okay, so you want to start an application for fall 2022. So that will open up on September 1st. They won't be available before that, but I will send you a link to a helpful website. So this is where you will be able to begin your application for fall 2022 when it opens up. There's a question asking, where do we go on our student link to see if our official undergrad transcripts were received by BU? That is a good question. I don't know that off the top of my head where you see it on the student link. Catherine or Candace, I'm not sure if you have a better idea of that.
Yeah, Brittany, so I will, there are instructions on our newly admitted students page, so I will send a link to that in the chat, and you just want to go under the records and registration section, and you'll be able to find instructions to see if we have your official transcript already on file.
Perfect, thank you. I know that we are receiving a huge volume of transcripts right now, so there might be a little bit of a delay in us responding to your emails or uploading them to your account. So even if you have sent them to us, it might take a few weeks for us to officially process them. So keep that in mind. But I do recommend that you keep checking on your student account just to see if we have gotten them yet. Okay, here's another question. You're currently in your final semester of undergrad. You might receive your transcript a little bit late. Can you submit your transcript after you arrive on campus? Yep, yeah. So we know that with everything going on, you might be receiving your transcript a little bit later than normal. So you can definitely submit them once you either arrive on campus in a signed and sealed envelope from your university. We can receive them really up until registration for the spring semester. If we haven't received your official transcripts by spring registration, then you will not be able to register for your spring courses. So there's not really a hard deadline to receive final official transcripts, except for before spring registration. Yes, that is a good question. We do offer discounted T passes For students, let me send you the link to that. Because that's definitely something that you'll want if you plan on transporting around on the MBTA, then you'll definitely want the semester pass as it is discounted. So let me send that to you. Here is the link. I believe that you do have to go to your student link to actually select and sign up for it. But this website has more information about that. It looks like the deadline to do that is August 10. So you might want to look into that pretty soon here. And Catherine sent a really helpful website as well about transportation in and around Boston. All right. Well, if you guys do think of any other questions, definitely do not hesitate to reach out to us. We are always happy to help. So you can reach out to us either at GRSMAMS or at grsaid@bu.edu. And we will be happy to talk with you further. But I do want to be conscious of everyone's time, so I will end the presentation here. But thank you for joining us today.